Live with Look Who's on Campus this week with Ben Brewer. You see his smiling face right there on screen. Well, now it's time to meet the person. And here he is. Hey, Ben Brewer, how are you doing, man?
Hey, DP, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. As you know, Look Who's on Campus is all about trying to get to know the people who are members of Nonfiction Brandversity a little bit better, so we can not only understand who they are and where they're coming from, but also how they might be able to help you or you might be able to help them. So one of the cool things about Ben is he's one of our local photographers, certainly within the Nonfiction Brandversity group, but also very local to anybody who's in the Dane County region of Wisconsin. You can go to his website at benbrewerphoto.com and see his work. And I think what you'll see is that I'm going to say that you have a very organic style. You have a very editorial style. It's about capturing true moments, capturing authentic moments. Am I right when I say that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of been my approach as a photographer, as a photojournalist. I think specifically that's kind of my area of expertise, kind of photojournalism, editorial style. You know, honestly, yeah, just capturing things as they are. It's an art that I think gets lost in everybody saying, "Hey, pose for this picture." But you actually find that you get these really beautiful, candid moments out of all sorts of different places. So yeah, I've been here in Madison about coming up on I guess 5 years now. So. I've been liking it here in Dane County.
Yeah, well, and it looks like Dane County's liking you. It's giving you a lot of fodder for taking some really interesting photo essays. Like if you go to the benbrewerphoto.com, you can take a look at some of his what I would call photo essays. I'm sure you call it that too.
Yeah.
And they're pretty darn interesting because you can see again there's a difference between someone with a camera who snaps a photo and a photographer who's out there seeking to tell a story, and I can definitely see that story being told in the work that you do. So again, check out benbrewerphoto.com and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Another thing I wanted to talk to you specifically about, and this goes to the needs of every individual who's out there seeking to up their social game, is that you need a good profile photo. You need a good look, and you need a good picture. And again, I'm staring. I'm actually looking at one of my screens with your stuff on there, and you demonstrate a number of different styles, including what I would call full-on eyes into the camera portraiture, but also kind of call it work style photography. It's a chance to demonstrate not only what you look like, but also maybe the sector in which you work. Like I'm looking at one guy who's standing in front of Baird Materials cement mixer truck.
Yep.
And one, that could be cropped into a really nice LinkedIn profile shot. Mm-hmm. But two, that shot itself becomes a really great website identifier shot as well, because it's literally saying, "Hey, I work for Baird." Is it Bard? I guess it's Bard Materials.
Baird.
Baird. Okay.
Yeah.
I work for that materials company, and this is what I look like. And by the way, if you're looking for someone who's a florist, don't look at me. And visual branding. Gosh, let's talk about that. Visual branding is as important as anything. And what's your take on actually visually branding personal brands?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess let me back up a little bit. So, one of the things that it's been sort of my mandate as an editorial photographer, especially doing a lot of work with, I do a lot of work with Reuters, New York Times, kind of other wire services. So it's kind of, you only often have the chance to maybe get one photo that runs. So it's kind of that mandate of the editorial photographer saying, you have to tell a story in a single picture. And so you have to use that single picture to give everyone all the information they need about, say, like that person or a story or an event that's happening. You have to be able to tell that in just that single photo. And that's really kind of the approach I've been taking in a lot of my work, especially, those sort of portraiture pieces, say. So that you mentioned that cement mixer truck thing, that was for a nonprofit focused in the renewable energy space, and that was one of the companies that worked on a particular project here in Wisconsin. So I wanted to say, there's this kind of figure. He's got to be important to the story, but also kind of the industrial side. So how do you kind of pull all those strings together to form that one, that hero image, as it were? So after that brief tangent, getting back to your question about, personal branding, I think it is, you want to have images that tell a story, even if you only have the one. And whether that's your, profile picture, which honestly, I think that's, first impressions are not to be discounted. I think you do want to be able to have people see you and have a story in their mind of what they expect from you, what they know they're going to get from you. But also when it comes to, creating imagery for, whatever materials you're doing, you want it to have that both a story involved as well as that kind of consistent look and feel.
Well, and if people want to know exactly the photo we're talking about, all you have to do is go to benbrewerphoto.com. Under the photo or portfolio tab, there's another sub-tab called People. Click on that, and you'll page over about 8 photos, and you'll see a guy standing in front of a yellow tanked cement mixer in a black and gray kind of jacket thing. I look at this photo and I say, wow, again, it would look great on a website, but I could crop in tight on the face and it becomes this really great dynamic profile pic for LinkedIn. I mean, come on, we've got these little, when you've got profile photos, they're oftentimes really small and you don't have a lot of room to, quote, tell that story. But you sure can convey an attitude, and this guy's face has attitude in it. It's got power and strength. And also the fact that he's not in a suit and tie in some bland boardroom says a whole lot about him in a very, I think, successful, meaningful way. And I love this type of profile pic because, again, because we have the opportunity in LinkedIn to have the profile photo, but then you can have a banner photo. This could be the banner photo that goes right with the profile photo, so you get this 1-2 punch. And I think there's real value there. So my question to a lot of the nonfiction branders who might be out there is, are you using your profile pic and your banner photo pic to give that 1-2 punch of personal branding image power at people? And if you're not, maybe take a look at it. Have you ever thought about that as a profit center for you as a business, to say, hey, I do profile pics, but I give you a profile banner pic package, because all of a sudden your price point, and I don't know what your price point is, but sometimes people go, it's just a tiny photo. I don't know if it's worth that much. But then if you say, no, it's a photo that, and by the way, I'll do the cropping for you. I'll do the optimizing for you. You'll get a photo suite. Banner size photo for LinkedIn, or call it a horizontal landscape orientation, a tight crop for a headshot that optimizes the space within the small allotted space for the profile pic, and something like that. And all of a sudden it becomes a lot more possible for people to say, you know what, that's kind of worth the price of admission, especially if I then have a big beauty shot, a hero shot for my website as well, because, I don't know about you, but sometimes the services I provide are not valued as highly as perhaps they should be, because
you're preaching to the choir.
Oh man, well, I'm a word guy, right? And here's the thing. Everybody thinks they know how to type. Well, how to write. No, a lot of people know how to type, but not a lot of people know how to tell a story. In your case, visually, in my case, verbally or with words. And sometimes that's undervalued. So and this is a total non-brander, non-fiction brander tip. If people are having trouble understanding your value, demonstrate it and package it in ways that people go, oh, I'm getting a lot more for it. For example, I'm just going to pull a price point out, and let's say you charge $500 for a session. And again, I don't know what you charge. But $500 for a photo? Are you kidding me? That's pretty steep for me, individual. But then I find out that no, there's a banner photo, there's a profile pic, there's a couple of different sizes of this thing, and you've got everything you need. Call it the social media nonfiction branding package for this dollar amount. And all of a sudden you've convinced me that, wow, that's actually worth it, because to you, how long does it take you to take a crop or to optimize from a landscape to a small profile pic size thing? Minimal amount of time, but there's maximum amount of value to people who don't have the wherewithal or even the interest to figure out, okay, how do I optimize my photo for that small little thing, but I want the big banner thing too. And if you do the work for me, I'm willing to pay you more because there's a value add involved there. Packaging, the way back at the beginning of personal branding, Tom Peters, the brilliant business consultant who came up with the whole idea of personal branding in 1996, if you look at the Wikipedia definition of personal branding, it will say it's about self-packaging. Back before that, there were things like self-improvement. This was not about self-improvement. It's about self-packaging so that people understand who you are, what you do, and how you do it. If people, and in the case of you, Ben, hey, what if you came up with a product that had a set price that gave you this, and this? All of a sudden, the perception of value is much higher than a single pick for $500.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because so one of the things that I'm trying to not shift into, but kind of expand my freelance work into is doing a lot more corporate content. And that's primarily, I would say, in the video space. That's really where I'm putting more of my energy in terms of working with businesses. I think there's something different and more impactful about an honest, real, not overproduced kind of mini documentary about a company. I think those have always been the most kind of impactful for me as just a regular citizen watching. And even, I see things like, I don't know if you're familiar with the work that REI does, a lot of their video content. I see stuff like that. And I think that really is kind of the next culmination of what corporate video is. It's not about you. It's about the values and the things that you stand for. So a lot of my energy recently in sort of working into the corporate space has been more into video content and kind of working in that direction. So it's interesting that you talk about kind of branding and packaging it. And I think that's been one approach for working with clients is saying, all right, if we plan this ahead, if we kind of work through this process in advance, you'll have this primary asset. This will be sort of your, visual video hero piece. But, when we're working through interviews, if we structure this correctly, you can have all sorts of different social cuts that come out of it. You can have also even different topics that come out of it. If I'm talking with a business owner, family business kind of thing, I'm really concerned about what their values are, all of that. And, I'll sneak in, give me the story of how this started. Like that's sort of the human side to it. And then you can get the technology side. You can kind of bring in all these different elements as you're constructing an interview, as you're creating it. So that, say, on the back end, you can create all these different assets and, like you said, kind of package them all together.
Well, one of my favorite things to advise people to do is what I call FAQ, VAQ. Your frequently asked questions should be video answered questions, and that's exactly what you're talking about, which is you sit down with an interview, you go through a series of questions. You now take those individual questions, pull them out in isolation, put a nice graphic up front and a nice tail, a bookend at the end that brands the whole piece. And you've got the person who's an influencer, owner, whatever, at the business who answer the question via video. And that's, by the way, that video can then be transcribed and cleaned up a little bit to take it out of the verbal English and put it on to written English. And that can be HTML searchable type right below the video. I mean, this is all an SEO play too, because if if people are always asking for how can this benefit me or something, you answer that question, your SEO, when someone types that into Google's search box, boom, your video is going to pop up. Why? Because the transcription's there so that Google knows that the video is about this. You know, huge killer tip. Dan LaCloche chimes in to say, to me, photos are really, really short videos, so they need to tell a story. You know, I think that's a great way of looking at it, because it's not just a picture of what you look like. It's really a representation of who you are, what you do, and how you do it. So let's tell that story via picture, if at all possible.
Yeah, kind of goes the other way too. It's like a video is just a series of lots and lots of still images, so it's got to be just as visually impactful as a still.
Hey, I want to remind everybody that if you'd like your profile pic to be used and pulled in to screen for comments, like take a look at this one. Somebody who I don't know says, "I like your profile, Ben." Hey, nice profile, Ben. If you'd like your nice little photo to go along with it, all you have to do is click the URL above the video screen where it says ecam.live/878 blah, blah, blah. That will allow Ecamm to get permission to pull your photo and then display it on screen. So that's very helpful to me to know who's talking. I want to say hi to Dan LaCloche, who's, of course, online, and Mandy Klepfer as well. We've got somebody else who shall remain nameless until I see their profile pic. But enough about that. Let's get back to Ben. So, Ben, how did you start your career in video, or I'm going to just call it visual storytelling, because it could be still, it could be motion, but it's all about visual storytelling.
Yeah, I think so. As a kid, I was a terrible artist who loved and appreciated art. And I think, it was probably maybe sometime in middle school, I picked up a camera for the first time. I picked up some of my dad's old film cameras, old rangefinder cameras, and I just said, I get this. There's something about this that's different, that I didn't have the hand-eye coordination for drawing and painting and all that, but for some reason, cameras just always clicked. And then I kind of said, I want to make a career of this. And it was still a high school kind of pipe dream at a certain point, but I got to college, started working for the school newspaper there, and it was that first aha moment of, oh, you're going to pay me to take pictures. Okay. All right. I guess this is real. Something about that sort of confirmed it and went, okay, yeah, let's do this. Let's make this happen. And so from there, I did a number of internships around the country. I went out to Northern Idaho, Salt Lake City, worked for the newspapers there, and back to Minneapolis briefly before coming back here to Dane County. And I think, really, I would say that my career in visual storytelling really didn't really get achieve critical mass, I think, until I moved here to Wisconsin. Something about the timing of things worked out with the way that my skills were progressing, and it just happened to work out. As far as kind of video and stills, I think I started as a still shooter, and I guess I'm kind of dating myself slightly that I started on film, and then digital showed up, but very briefly. So it was one of those, I started, and then pretty early on, it's like, oh, this is accessible, digital now, and then kind of switching over very early. So that was one way to, and then I also had the experience of starting with still cameras, and then all of a sudden they decided to put video in still cameras, and then you went, oh, I can use, this is just another tool. This is another way to tell visual stories. And then I kind of got hooked on trying to incorporate video and just learn it, because it's, for not being a video guy starting out, it's a lot to learn, especially when you're shooting on DSLRs at first, that, there's no autofocus, there's no audio coming in. It's like, and I look back at some of the early stuff that I did and it just cringe, of course, but it got me sort of curious as sort of, this is just another medium. It's just another tool. The camera is just a tool to tell the story. So that is something that I'm thinking about all the time. Say if I'm working on a personal project or working on a project for a client, I have to do that sort of mental calculus of, does this make more sense as a video? Does this make more sense as images? Does this make more sense as audio only? I mean, sometimes an audio slideshow, it's a lost art because people have kind of stopped doing it. But, sometimes that makes the most sense versus a video. So you're using the message that you're trying to achieve and then kind of walking back to the medium that makes the most sense.
Well, I like what you were saying about the fact that I'm going to interpret what you said to say technology changed, technique did not. It's always about going back to fundamental storytelling techniques. With visual storytelling, there are things that never will change. Things like brightness or light and shadow, chiaroscuro. It goes all the way back to the light and shadow of the shading of the great masters of Italy and things like that. That hasn't changed. Now the technology has, and I think a lot of people make the mistake of embracing the technology without understanding the technique or mastering the technique. And that to me is the difference, because I remember a friend of mine told me about a shoot that he did in Florida where they had a whole grip truck, one of these Hollywood grip trucks where you had more light than God could create. And they threw tons of light on this swimming pool at a house and all this stuff, and they spent 4 hours lighting the thing. And then when the director of photography was ready to go, he said, okay, let's go. He reaches in, he pulls out a GoPro, and he shoots it with a GoPro. But he had a very specific idea in mind, which is the right brush for this shot is a GoPro. Not the highest resolution, but it had the right feeling or taste or whatever. So he applied all the technological technique that was possible and then picked the right artistic tool to tell the story he wanted to tell. And that really amazed my friend. And when I heard that story, I went, oh, that's cool. I totally get why you do it. Because let's face it, some of the most effective Hollywood films have been shot partially on crappy jerky cam, like what was it? Dr. Strangelove, Stanley Kubrick. Some of the battle scenes where they're trying to take over the place where what is his name? Colonel Jack Ripper. Yeah. Or whatever, the Air Force Base, they shot with like 16 millimeter handheld to get the effect of a battle scene. And this is Stanley Kubrick, who could have Panavision everything wherever he wanted to. He chose to go back to a much lower grade camera to achieve a specific effect. So again, it's not necessarily about technology. It's about the story that you want to tell and how you want to tell it. And that should be a lesson to all of us that, oh, I can't do that because I don't have fill in the blank. That's a false argument. If you don't want to do it because you're lazy or don't want to do it, that's fine. But don't blame your technology, because right now, if you've got one of these, you've got more technology than anybody had, more power to edit and post and shoot, edit, and post than anybody did in the golden age of cinema. Now,
and it's so true. I mean, it's a double-edged sword for me as a photographer, as a creator, because the kind of the access, the democratization of visuals is at an all-time high, I would say, that everybody has access to it. It also means that people don't necessarily value it in the same way that they used to. So I'm on it. I'm happy that people have access to these things, and they can do incredible things. They can create incredible work. You can do a whole feature film. I believe, who was it? I think Jim Jarmusch just shot an entire film on an iPhone.
Yeah, Steven Soderbergh did on iPhone with Tangerine.
Oh, Soderbergh. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Right. Well, there's been a couple actually.
At least, yeah, a couple. And it goes to show that it's not about the tools. It's how you use them. If you create a compelling story, people will watch it.
Well, let's talk about that, especially about using the tools. You've got a brand new podcast that's coming out, and it's geared toward, well, let me ask you this. What audience is it geared toward?
Yeah, so the podcast is really geared towards, visual creators of all stripes. I think it's photographers, it's videographers, multimedia folks. And I think to some degree, I think the marketing world needs to hear about it too, because marketing folks will work with people in visuals, but not really understand what goes into it necessarily. So it's partly an educational sort of thing, but more than that, it's about learning from, the best visual creators in the world. They know a hell of a lot more than I do. So partly I want to just learn from them. So the name of the podcast is the Photo Forward Podcast. And it's, it's long form interviews with photojournalists, photographers, videographers, cinematographers, really trying to just unpack what got them to where they are, what lessons can we all learn from that? What does it mean to tell a story with pictures?
Well, that's cool. Dan LaCloche says that he did a 10-second toot about not worrying about the quality of equipment, and then he provides the incredibly long URL. So if you want to check out Dan LaCloche's 10-second toot, I suggest you go to YouTube and type in Dan LaCloche 10-second toot, because that URL, I'm sorry, no one's going to get that, even if you take a photo of it right now.
Come on, Dan. That's what Bitly's for.
Yeah, Bitly. Exactly. Well, let's talk about that, about your podcast, because you mentioned the fact that marketing people might want to listen to it. I love podcasts. Some people want podcasts that are what I would refer to as direct knowledge. Like, I want a podcast that tells me step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how to do something. And then there are podcasts that I personally listen to that are like knowledge adjacent, meaning one of my favorite podcasts is Reid Hoffman's Masters of Scale. And it's a brilliant podcast. I never want to scale my business. I mean, I'm not interested in getting a 50x return on anything like that. I just want to have a happy, healthy life and all that stuff. So why am I listening to this podcast that is self-labeled Masters of Scale? Because they're dropping bombs of goodness, of thought, wonderfulness, of just incredible stuff and inspiration and energy. Like, one of my favorite episodes was the Danny Meyer, the guy behind Shake Shack, and his whole point of view of customer service and things like that. Do I work for a restaurant? No. Do I have to deal with customer service? Yes. Can I learn something kind of adjacent? I don't know about you, but I've always been someone who felt like I learned more from novels than I did nonfiction books, because novels talk about kind of that first principles, human condition understanding stuff, rather than you do this, you do this, you do this. And if you're that type of person, maybe Ben Brewer's brand new podcast is something you should listen to, especially if you feel yourself a little bit deficient in the area of visual storytelling. So where can people find the podcast, Ben?
Yeah, so people can find the podcast. It's going to be going live. I guess this is sort of a sneak peek. It'll be going live on May 1st, and they can listen to the intro to the series at photoforward.media/podcast. And then from there, once that link goes live on May 1st, they'll be able to find it in iTunes, Stitcher, really wherever you consume your podcast. It'll be all over.
Yeah, great. Well, why are you doing this podcast? I mean, from your and this is me asking from a nonfiction brander, I want to build my personal brand, I want to build my business, but I'm using kind of a new way, a new technique to do it. Why are you choosing podcasts as something to fold into your business strategy?
Yeah, partly for me, I just love pushing myself out of my comfort zone because I don't ever create anything worthwhile when I'm comfortable. So for me, audio that's kind of one of the places I wanted to go. Also, I am a voracious podcast listener, so I wanted to create something that I myself wanted to listen to. I have that sort of lifelong learner attitude. So I wanted to, learn from some of the best in the world. So what better way than to pick their brain over an hour and get everything I can from them. So it's both, honestly, a little bit selfish. I want to learn more. I want to be a better photographer, a better photojournalist. And I want to be able to share that with everybody else. So, because I think it's a world that people will only see the byline on a newspaper if they pick up a newspaper at all, but they'll only see a byline. They don't really know the people behind that's taking the pictures because, it's just a picture to a lot of people. So trying to understand the folks that do create these images, that's what kind of drove me to start doing it. And I thought about doing it for a while. I think last year is sort of the impetus of the idea of like, well, maybe this makes sense. It's both a way to, connect with my kind of community of, as small as it is, of followers online, but also just give them some of the knowledge that I want to receive myself. And so this year, really made the decision to follow through on it and do it. No time like the present, having one of those birthdays that ends in a 0 has a way of kind of driving a little forward momentum. So that was kind of the big push this year to really, go whole hog and make it happen.
Well, I will tell you that since I've done the Nonfiction Brand podcast, the ability to ask someone who's flying at an altitude much higher than me if they'd like to be on my podcast, the way it works is they kind of look at you like, sure, because it doesn't hurt me to get my name out there, even if you have a listener, your cat and your mom are your listeners. What, an hour of my time, sure, let's do it. And maybe there's a little bit of, okay, we'll see how this goes. And then by the end of the hour of the conversation, you've made a new friend. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, it works because I just got back from social media marketing world, and a lot of the people that I had interviewed who didn't know me at all that I met and ran into at social media marketing world, the second they understood who I was, they're like, DP! Because they felt like they knew me because we had a great conversation over an hour. So if you want to get to a flock that's flying at this level, even if you may perceive yourself as down here, one of the best ways to do it is start a podcast and then invite the people from the flock in which you want to fly moving forward onto your podcast. Because guess what? To listeners, you're a peer of whoever your guest is. So killer technique. And and by the way, it is exactly what you said. It's a great way to learn. It's a great way to share. And it's a fantastic nonfiction brand way of showing who you are, what you do, and how you do it. Why not do it? And it's so easy now. I mean, yeah. I mean, back in the day, a long time ago, probably 2004 or something like that, Wired Magazine had a story in it about podcasting, this thing that Adam Curry was doing. Do you remember Adam Curry? All the original people who were alive at the launch of MTV will remember that there were 4 original VJs. Adam Curry was one of them. And then he disappeared off the face of the earth after a while. All of a sudden, this thing called the iPod comes out, and people are looking at it going, what can you do with it? And some people said, hey, I can record a radio show, essentially. Let people download that radio show and listen to it whenever they want. And that was the first wave of podcasting. And I remember seeing that story going, God, that's kind of interesting. Okay. And then it kind of interesting turned into nothing until kind of Serial came out. Has everybody listened to Serial, the Adnan,
I hope so.
what's his name, episodes? Oh, my gosh, it blew up, and things went crazy with podcasting. Here's the thing. Podcasting is easy to do. Some of the technical stuff can be a little bit challenging, but that's why you listen to podcasts, to hear, okay, stylistically, how are they doing it? This one's a little rougher. This one sounds better. Develop your ear and then start thinking about what podcast you can do, because it's such a killer opportunity to get in front of great people. Like Ben and I, we haven't really talked much at all. I mean, I think we've met in person a couple of times and things like that, but I knew very little about you before we started this conversation. Now I know a lot more, and that's really cool. I want to ask you this question about your willingness to help or answer questions to nonfiction branders within the group about things like technology or techniques or things like that. Are you open to fielding questions from people within the group about, within reason, people, about things like cameras or technique or things like that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm always all about sharing the knowledge as best I can. I'm not a huge gearhead, but I'm keeping up to date with things. But honestly, I think it's just I'd rather have a more collaborative kind of conversation with somebody and say like, all right, well, what are you trying to achieve? What's your goal? Then maybe we walk back to saying, well, all right, maybe this is a camera for you, or maybe you should look into hiring somebody, or, oh, you can probably do this with your iPhone. It's all about what people want to achieve. So yeah, I love having those conversations with people that just kind of really dig at the root of what do you want? What's your objective? What's your goal?
Dan Lecloche, of course, says, this is great. I've met Ben a few times at networking events, but this extended conversation really helped us all learn more about his work and personality. Hashtag NFBV and I'm going to add an FTW on there, for the win. Yeah, absolutely. Dan is also asking, do you do any tilt shift work?
It's not, I guess, and to back up for people that might not know what that is, tilt shift photography, it's a special type of lens that kind of changes the focal plane of the picture you're taking that makes everything look like a little miniature city if you're doing it from above. I don't personally. There's actually, he's from Wisconsin. I think he's based here. His name's Adam Senatori. He does a lot of drone visuals, does a lot of stuff like that. And one of the things he does is these really amazing looking tilt shift aerials that just throw your perspective all out of alignment of what's big and what's small. And so I don't personally do it. It's a neat party trick, but for the right purpose, it could make sense. But yeah, I haven't personally.
Yeah, tilt shift has been around as a technique that architectural photographers have been using forever, but it only really popped into the general consciousness when the BBC series Sherlock first came out, because the opening credits show London looking like this little, snow globe world almost, with tiny people and all that stuff, and all of a sudden it was everywhere. I mean, Sherlock, seriously, Sherlock, the first series, look at the opening titles of that, and you'll see tilt shift used perfectly. But it is a technique that's like cilantro. When Americans first got cilantro, all of a sudden, boom, it's in everything, and too much of it. You got to season. Tilt shift is very pungent. It's a very pungent spice. Yeah. You have to use it judiciously. But this is a great example of Ben being a resource for not only things about technique and stuff, but if you have photography questions, you're a resource that you can go to and maybe pass on to someone else like Adam Sanatori or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Because you have, like, if I think of all the people in nonfiction brandversity, we're all these little bubbles that are connected kind of in an adjacency or in the same kind of corral. Well, let's use our expertises to, hold on. I want to connect to you because you're an expert in X. You connect to me because I'm an expert in Y. And let's level each other up and be each other's reference points, referral libraries, you name it. Because that's how we can help each other. And again, we're all in this group for free. Let's extract all the value out of it by helping and asking and sharing. And by the way, I want to invite everybody in the group to start using the group as your question-answer place. I went to, as you all guys all know, I went to Social Media Marketing World, and a couple of the sessions I went to were specifically about creating a dynamic Facebook group and Facebook community. And so you're going to see me throwing in a lot more polls, a lot more quizzes, a lot more challenges, things like that as time goes by. but I invite you guys to do so as well. The only ground rules are this is about sharing, not shilling. It's not about selling. I mean, obviously, if you're doing, like Ben, if you're doing a photo workshop, let people know, but don't sell. That, you can do a post about it, let people know where, when, how much it is, all that stuff. But it's like posting up on a bulletin board. I invite you to do that stuff if it's directly tied to who you are, what you do, and how you do it. No Arbonne, no Pampered Chef, no multi-level marketing BS. It's all about nonfiction brand, who you are, what you do, and how you do it. Let's share with each other so that we all know what each other does and how we can help each other out. Dan asks another question. Ben, do you hang out with a group of photographers? Is there a secret society?
The only society that I hang out with, and it's not that secret, unfortunately, is the National Press Photographers Association. That's a really, really big group that I love to be connected with. National organization, conferences throughout the year. That really brings people together because I think a lot of us kind of operate in our own little market here, or Madison or Tulsa or wherever, and you kind of live in your little bubble. So they do a really good job of kind of making it a national organization, national advocacy, all of that. So yeah, that is my secret society. That's not that secret.
Well, let me talk about that for a second because, again, this is fresh on my mind because I just got back from San Diego. Going out to Social Media Marketing World, the opening night or pre-opening night party where people who get there Tuesday for a Wednesday event, everybody, room full of 200, 300 people, all these social media marketers, nobody was on their cell phone. Nobody was doing the old avoiding contact. It was the loudest party I've ever been at because people were within their tribe talking about tribal interests, and a lot of the conversation was, so where are you from? Oh, that's really cool. I've never been there. It's getting to know each other and making connections. Those connections are the things that can really help you level up your game as a personal brand. And you never know if the person right next to you is someone you should know because they're flying at a much higher altitude. And I'll give you an example of that. I met a couple of women from Lima, Peru. We had a great conversation at that party. And the next day, I ran into one of them, and I gave them a copy of Rotoma, the book I wrote with Spencer X. Smith. And the woman looked at it and looked at me and said, I know this book. I know this book. How do I know this book? I know this book. It ends up her colleague had purchased the book last year from Amazon, paid $25 to ship it down to Peru, and we had spent the previous evening talking to each other, and she had no idea that the DP who wrote the book was the DP she was talking to. But how cool is that? I now have really close friends in Lima, Peru, that I'm going to leverage somehow, if for no other reason than a great family trip down to Lima. But ideally, one of these days, you're going to find out that I'm doing a Latin American tour to Pablo Killian's home in Buenos Aires, Argentina, or Deli and Carolina's home in Lima, and then my friend Carlos, who I met at Social Media Marketing World, in Santiago, Chile. So there's 3 South American countries covered. I just need to find someone from Uruguay, Colombia, et cetera, et cetera. But that will happen because I'm getting out of my box. I'm meeting people who are part of my tribe I just haven't met yet. And sharing of myself, finding out what I can benefit from them, and really helping each other take their game to the next level. So, Ben, what are you looking for from the members of Nonfiction Brandversity? How can we specifically help you in your journey to become the best Ben you can be?
That is a good question. I think so. My kind of real goal for the next, shorter amount of time, short-term goal is I'm moving towards going full-time freelance. That's kind of, as it is. Everybody's got their desk job and their other job basically at this point and in the way the economy is going. But my goal is really pushing towards going full-time freelance in the next few years. So honestly, I know I've met with some folks that have kind of made that transition. How does that look, financially? How does that look emotionally? All of that kind of stuff. So, honestly, I'd love to just like talk people's ear off about how they made that transition. When it comes to work, I just want to be able to give to people what I know about visual storytelling, photography, videography, any of those sort of things. And yeah, just being able to consult with people and be a partner to folks that might need it or don't know that they need it.
Well, I just made a note to self that's kind of related to the on-screen comment from Dan Lecloche. It'd be so awesome if DP, Ben, and I could work together on a project together. I'll put that thought on my vision board. Well, Dan, let's not put it on your vision board. Let's put it into practice by maybe scheduling what I'm going to call a soul hustle transition meetup where, because I don't know if you're familiar with this terminology yet, but it came about because the very first Look Who's on Campus was with Sharon Land, and she was talking about her side hustle. She was a realtor, but her side hustle was in the health and wellness space. And it just occurred to me, no, Sharon, everything you're describing, that's not a side hustle. That's your soul hustle. That's the one that fills you up. That's the one that creates the best Sharon Land there can be. And so that one of the key pillars of nonfiction brandversity is that we're all about trying to develop our soul hustle, either level up what we currently have or make the jump from full-time job working for someone else to soul hustle working for myself. So I'm thinking that we need to schedule a Dane County soul hustle transition meetup sometime very soon. So
I like that.
Keep an eye on this space. Because we will figure out a time. I think we could probably do maybe at Dream Bank. The new Dream Bank allows you to reserve they have a really great library space. It's reservable, so maybe we can do it there. Or maybe we can go someplace and get a beer or something and just meet up and talk about that, because I know a lot of people, some people are totally out doing their thing. Others are 50-50, it's transitioning. Others are strictly, I would love to even have a soul hustle to help. Well, guess what? We all get together. We have a lot of information and energy and inspiration we can share. That's what nonfiction brandversity is all about, baby. And Dan says, I'm on board. I've been hustling my soul for 10 years. And I think I've seen you working on East Wash, and we'll not go any further with that, Dan. But anyway, so let's just close off this conversation because we're going 47 minutes on a half-hour conversation, Ben, but that's how it works. Where can people find out more about you, Ben?
Sure, absolutely. People can find me either at my website, which is www.benbrewerphoto.com. I'm mostly active probably on Instagram, and I'm at @bbrewerphoto. And then I have my Ben Brewer Photo Facebook page, which is of the same name. You can just go to, I believe it's fb.me, the short link, /bbrewerphoto, and you can get over there and connect with me. Anybody here in nonfiction brandversity, just give me a shout. Happy to chat with you guys.
Well, quick kind of tech question: what camera platform do you shoot?
That's a good one. Before this week, I would have said Canon 100%. I have just switched into having part Canon, part Sony.
Oh, wow. So you're going full frame with a A7 or something like that?
Yeah, I just picked up an A9 actually.
Oh, nice. Well,
I shoot a lot of sports too. That's one of the things, and news work is fast paced, quick. You gotta have that. So I'm kind of in the middle of transitioning to a Sony kit, which is very strange to say, but I'm very happy with it.
Well, that'd be an interesting conversation, even to those people who are not into technology. You now have experience with Canon and Sony. I know other people shoot Nikon. Like if we got together and kind of swapped ideas and the reason why you should go X instead of Y or why I do. That's a valuable thing, especially before someone drops $700 on a camera body, much less glass. So,
yeah.
All right. So, everybody, thank you for hopping into this Look Who's on Campus. It's Ben Brewer. Thanks, Ben, for being on this. Look for the what was the name of the podcast?
Yeah, it's the Photo Forward podcast.
And that launches May 1st, 2019. And so look for it wherever fine podcasts are free. That's what I like to say. I'm DP Knudten for the Nonfiction Brandversity, and he is
Ben Brewer.
And we'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
All right, bye, everybody.